Good morning, Anish.
Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome Anish Melwani, the Chairman and CEO of LVMH for North America. So Anish oversees the group's entire brand portfolio across the United States and Canada: Louis Vuitton, Fendi, Dior, Givenchy, Tiffany, Tag Heuer, Bulgari, just to name a few. So guiding some of the world's most iconic maisons in one of the most strategic and competitive markets. Well, Anish, before joining LVMH in 2015, you spent more than a decade at McKinsey, where Anish co-led the global strategy and corporate finance practice and advised major international companies on transformation and long-term value creation. Today, Anish, you sit at the heart of the group's growth engine, North America, steering brand strategy, retail innovation, digital acceleration, talent development, and the vital bridge between creative excellence and commercial performance. We are truly honored to have you with us at the Transatlantic Leaders Forum to discuss leadership, innovation, and the future of the luxury industry. So to kick it off, Anish, how would you describe LVMH's mission in North America today? And has that vision evolved in recent years?
Sure. So thank you, George, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It's my privilege. I think the mission, fundamentally, of LVMH in the U.S., first of all, is driven by our maisons. Our maisons are the ones that go to market. They're the ones that actually make beautiful, crafted things. They create desirability through all their communications activities. I would say the overall role of the holdings, of my role and my organization, is to help our maisons in any way we can to figure out how to get further into American culture. At the end of the day, luxury is a cultural phenomenon. Luxury goods are cultural items. And understanding how to put those products, put those messages in front of people in the way that makes the most sense and is culturally relevant is part of what we try to do. I would say what's evolved is, my view of the mission is that we should always be trying to make it an asset for a maison to be part of the LVMH group versus if they were independent on their own, right? And that means doing things like working together when it comes to negotiating leases with landlords if there's a new shopping center, and making sure that we get good locations, get good conditions for our maisons, et cetera. Lately, we've seen a lot of changes in the department store landscape in the U.S., and making sure that even our smallest maisons understand what's happening with our department store partners, making sure that everyone's treated at the same level. Those are the kinds of things that we spend a lot of time working on. But it's also when we do our best is when we can actually help to, through luxury, evolve the market. And I think the best example of that is probably the Miami Design District, where the group, and this is before my time that it was created, but in my time we've had the privilege of watching it develop into truly a cultural hub. And it's changed the entire South Florida landscape. And that required collective action by the group's maisons, working with our partners down there. And now you have a place which is now sort of a must-visit destination in Miami, and luxury is at the core of it.
And when you're talking about it, what also resonates is that culture of excellence, creativity. Also, we've spoken about entrepreneurship. Now, when we're taking a step back and looking at LVMH as a global organization, I named a few of the brands, and there are many more. Can you share with us a little bit about that global footprint, the growth ambitions, and how North America today fits within that strategy?
So North America right now is the largest single region, and about 25-26% of our global revenues come from here. But I believe it was true 10 years ago, and I think it's still true, that it's our biggest growth potential. And the reason for that is fundamentally, when you look at countries around the world by GDP per capita, and you look at the penetration of luxury into culture, and into what percent of the population that can afford luxury, purchase luxury, the US is still very underpenetrated. And this I was taught by folks in the group like Michael Burke and Sidney Toledano, who've been in the industry for much longer than me, that the US historically, from a retail perspective, has always been a value market. If you look at who the largest retailers in the US are, they are value retailers. The US doesn't have the same historical connection to luxury that Europe does. I've had Europeans explain to me the phenomenon of, when a young woman turns a certain age, she's gifted a perfume that she would not be allowed to wear if she was younger than that, because it wouldn't be appropriate. And there's a coming of age element of luxury perfumes in certain cultures in Europe. George, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you shared with me a wonderful story about your own history with luxury, which involved your parents taking you to purchase something of luxury when you were 18. That, aside from being a luxury item, is so well made that it's still getting used today.
True. My son is now wearing it. But.
Right? So George has a fabulous tuxedo that if you ever meet his son, he'll be wearing a beautiful Dior tuxedo. But that's representative of European culture. That doesn't exist in American culture if you go back in the last 200 years or so. So little by little, penetrating American culture is where the opportunity lies, because fundamentally the US has a far higher percentage of its citizens that can afford luxury products. And so figuring out how to first of all, build the desirability, because luxury always starts with desire, and then also to make sure that it's being fulfilled in a way that is true to the values of LVMH around creativity and innovation, but also core excellence.
But do you then adjust the brand portfolio, the brand mix, to fit these cultural differences relative to other markets?
So the short answer is, everything in luxury comes down to the quality of the product, and that cannot change, right? What you do is you certainly play with sizing. So we buy different sizes for the US than we buy for China, than we buy for the Middle East, et cetera, internally. But the product has to be the same. What luxury brands are always looking to try to do is to find culturally relevant touch points that are as broad as possible. And again, as the world has in many ways gotten smaller with social media, we have phenomenon that we couldn't have totally predicted, right? I mean, now you do something with K-pop, and maybe you thought that was good for Korea and maybe China, but it turns out that's got huge relevance to major parts of the US market as well. So it's really about understanding the market you're trying to sell into, and then trying to figure out what are the touch points that will be relevant in as many of those places as possible. For us, sports is one that we've done more and more with lately, especially with Formula One. And I think there's lots of reasons behind that partnership, but one of the drivers is Formula One became a lot more relevant in the US after the Netflix series, after Drive to Survive. Prior to that, the number of Formula One fans in the US was relatively small. All of a sudden, in the last 7-8 years, Formula One has become a more prestigious sport that's relevant to the US. So therefore, partnering with Formula One and having that access to that audience became relevant in more parts of the world than it would have been 15, 20 years ago.
Wow, so this industry is changing, and the ways to resonate with your customers, how much is that evolving? Because we are seeing innovations, changing the experience we may have. Is it in boutiques? Is it the digital clientele? And obviously, I also ask, is AI impacting that, or is it elsewhere in the group you're leading?
Yeah. So I think if you go back, as I reflect on 10 years, it's very interesting to look at how people in luxury have thought about things that are digital. And AI being the latest digital thing that people have to think about. 10 years ago, it was an active debate about whether or not selling online was compatible with luxury. And one could argue that debate is still going because there are some maisons in the world that don't sell many of their products online. In our world, we have found that, especially in a market like the US, where the wealth and the affluence is so spread out across the country, and as you have younger generations, so much of the customer journey goes between offline and online, you have to be there. That's the appropriate way to serve the market. On the other hand, then you went to COVID, and we were very happy that we had the capabilities in digital so we could continue to serve clients while stores were closed and cities were locked down. You had other people saying, oh, no one's ever going to go back to stores. Now that they've switched to online, they're never going to go back to stores. And that also wasn't true, because at the end of the day, luxury purchases are about a feeling of accomplishment. Most people have been thinking about their first luxury purchase for months, years, sometimes decades before they get to make that purchase. And so while there is always going to be a segment of customer that will be served happily online, it's not the same to get a cardboard box outside of your door as it is to go into one of our beautiful boutiques, have a glass of champagne, look at the furniture and the artwork that's there, hear the storytelling firsthand behind this item that you've been dreaming about for so long, and then walk out with a beautiful shopping bag, right? And so while e-commerce is an important part of our business, in our luxury maisons, it never really trends higher than 15, 20%, because actually that luxury experience in the boutiques is critical. Now, to talk about AI, of course we're working with AI. To not work with AI would be like we don't work with the internet 20 years ago. It doesn't make any sense. I have a hypothesis that at some point, talking to a human is going to become a luxury experience. Because as mass uses the efficiencies of AI to have everything dealt with by chatbots and potentially even chatbots that talk to you, actually connecting with another human being is going to be something that luxury brands will be the few that are still in their business model able to afford that thing. That being said, talking to a human is only a luxury experience when the human is highly competent and able to help you quickly. Talking to a human that doesn't have the information you want, that isn't able to help you quickly, is a very frustrating experience and something we're trying to avoid. So what we've found so far that we've already deployed is AI tools to make our humans more efficient and effective and better able to connect with our clients. So whether this is tools in our customer service centers, call centers and contact centers that simplify the number of systems that our teams have to go into in order to access whatever it is the customer might be asking about. If it's a repair, if it's a question about a product, if it's anything like that, making it super easy for our colleagues to find that information creates a better experience for the customer while not losing that human touch, which, again, our clients value. Same thing in the store, right? At the end of the day, if you believe that we're going to continue to be a fundamentally physical retail experience with an e-commerce component, then humans in the store remain a critical component of that. But having those humans empowered with as much information as the client has already given us, but maybe they gave it to us in other stores, maybe they gave it to us online, having the sales associate, the client advisor, understand that customer as best as they can is going to yield a better experience for the client. And we are already, for a number of years now, been investing in those tools to help our client advisors.
Totally applicable to banks as well, by the way. Turning, Anish, if I may, to your personal experience, can you talk to us about one of your boldest strategic moves in North America and what you've taken from it for this audience?
Well, probably the biggest thing that I've personally been involved with is the launch of 22 Montaigne Entertainment, which we launched about 2 years ago now. And this came out of a sort of looking at the market and realizing a couple things. First, the affluent half of the population was paying to not have their entertainment interrupted by advertising. Right? So the entire streaming model is about paying up front so that you can watch whatever it is you want to watch and not be interrupted by advertising. Of course, there are ad-supported tiers. But again, from a values perspective, the people who are willing to watch advertising are unlikely to value luxury products. So it's clear that our clientele is the ones that are paying for that. Secondly, a great piece of entertainment can influence culture even if you only see it once, right? So an example I give is, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Sideways.
Yes.
Okay, and maybe some people in the audience have seen Sideways. Whenever I mention that movie, which, by the way, came out, I think, almost 30 years ago now, most people will instantly tell me how they don't drink Merlot because of that movie, right? And when you think about it, the ability for entertainment, we have a maison called Fred, which is a French jewelry maison. And when I ask people if they ever saw Pretty Woman, most people say yes. And I ask them if they remember the scene with the necklace. And then everyone remembers that one scene with the necklace. That was actually a Fred Joaillier necklace, because Fred used to have a boutique on Rodeo Drive. And you know, if people who are really fans of the movie remember even that it was a Fred necklace, right? So entertainment has an ability to enter consciousness in a way that advertising simply cannot. The model of advertising is to show somebody the same thing over and over and over again so it sticks in their brain. With entertainment, you can have a much shorter interaction but a much longer impact. And we, of course, like any major consumer organization, we spend a lot of money on advertising. But as I looked into it, it seemed that our efforts in entertainment, we had done things, but they were much more ad hoc. And it was much more about whether a particular maison had done something. So there's a great series on Apple TV Plus called The New Look, which tells the story of Christian Dior and the other couturiers at the end of World War II in France and what that was like and how they rebuilt their businesses after World War II. And Dior had worked with the producers of that. They were not a producer, but they worked with the producers to ensure that the couture dresses from the original New Look collection were produced by an actual couturier that we work with, because otherwise they wouldn't look right. They wouldn't look right on screen if they were just made by a Hollywood costume house, right? And then the modern audience that doesn't know the story of Christian Dior and the New Look in 1947 and everything that happened at that time might wonder, why was this so special? Because again, if it doesn't look right, the authenticity slips away and then the storytelling doesn't work. So 22 Montaigne is something we started a couple years ago. We have, at this point, we've reviewed 300 or 400 projects that have come into us. We have an active slate of 30 or 40 projects. We have 5 or 6 of them already signed that we're just waiting for the right time to make announcements with the producers and all the elements that have to get attached. And we've actually had projects which came from the industry to our maisons, and the 22 Montaigne team has helped facilitate those discussions. And then we've also worked with our maisons to brief the industry on stories and ideas that we think would be great to tell. And we have several of those deals that are now in development. It just takes a really long time, so in somewhere between 18 and 36 months, hopefully we'll see something on the screen that came out of this initiative.
Fascinating. Now, maybe as last question, what would be your advice to these leaders from the Transatlantic Forum when you're navigating both the American and European cultures? Is there something important you want to share?
You know, George, there's something that Mr. Arnault told me when he first met me 11 years ago, and others in the group explained to me, and I believe it's still true today, which is because so many, most leaders in France or in Europe today speak perfect English and conduct business in English. There's no language barrier with the US. There's an assumption that US culture is quite similar to European culture, or French culture specifically. And that's just not really true. But it's perpetuated by the fact that most people who visit tend to visit places like New York and LA, which are more cosmopolitan cities where there's probably closer alignment in culture. when you really understand the US, first of all, you realize that the US is less monolithic than most European cultures. It's got many more subcultures inside of it. And it takes a bit of investigation to really get underneath and understand American culture or different parts of American culture, and then adapt the elements of French culture to that. What's fascinating is you don't have the same challenge in Asia, probably because of the language barrier, right? Where you don't find people in Europe making the same assumptions about their familiarity with Chinese culture or Japanese culture that they sometimes make about American culture. And so my counsel to anyone doing business in both places is to recognize that, again, while the language may be common, the same thing, by the way, could be true for Americans looking at French culture, because you can meet French executives or European executives who speak perfect English. It's still important to understand French and European culture if you're an American going in the other direction. But I would just encourage any leader to sort of take the time, travel, if you're coming in the US, to get underneath, and I think it just yields better insights and better results.
Well, we'll take that. Thank you very much. Anish, Melwani, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.